This week on Quadriga, Euro crisis. Is Germany paying enough? Dramatic action is needed if the world is to avoid a severe depression. That's the warning from Christine Lagarde, the head of the International Monetary Fund. She argues the only way to deal with Europe's sovereign debt crisis is to take an American approach, flood the market with cheap money from the central bank and take on more debt. The Italian Prime Minister Mario Monti agrees, but German Chancellor Angela Merkel takes a different view. She first wants to see heavily indebted countries tighten their belts and introduce reforms. Your host this week is Terry Martin.
So, is Berlin fiddling while Rome burns? Or could this be Germany's finest hour? The world keeps looking to German Chancellor Angela Merkel to deal with Europe's debt fiasco. This week on Quadriga, we're talking about Germany's response to the crisis.
Joining Terry Martin in the studio. Quentin Peel of the UK is the Berlin bureau chief and an international affairs columnist with the Financial Times. He was previously the FT's foreign editor and has served as a correspondent in locations around the world. Friedrich Thelen is a veteran business and political journalist based in Berlin. Before starting his own consulting company, he was head of the Berlin Parliamentary Bureau of the German business weekly Wirtschaftswoche. Stefano Casertano is an academic and journalist specializing in foreign relations. He teaches international politics at Potsdam University and writes a column for the Italian online newspaper L'Inchiesta.
Friedrich, the world keeps looking to Germany and saying, come on, Germany, help out. Let's fix this crisis. It's up to you to do something. What is Germany not doing?
Well, I don't think the Germans hesitate on helping the others. The only question is what is to come out at the end? I mean, putting more money in, flooding the market, Is that what it is, money? The world wants to see Germany simply throw more money at this problem? At least some of the countries in Europe think if there would be only more German-based liquidity, well, the problem would be over. But it's only over for a short time. Then the problems come back. The United States have created enormous debts. They came later. I mean, that's when all started in 2008 and 2009. Spending the money alone is not the solution. You must bind more money to restructuring of the economies. And I think if the German government gives it away, this handle for saying, well, if you do your homework, then we're going to help you. There are faults in this thing. Only you cannot fall back to the Brüning policies of the 30s, only starvation all the time, only saving. You must also have an impetus to get it. But it's a balanced thing.
Well, you mentioned the 30s. Christine Lagarde, the head of the International Monetary Fund, she was just in Berlin, and she painted a very grim scenario for the world economy, referring back to the 1930s, the depression of that time, saying that if this problem isn't fixed properly, we could see those sorts of situations, which would be horrible, of course. The pressure on Germany is coming from a lot of different angles, including the IMF, also the United States. What should Germany be doing that it's not already doing, Quentin?
Well, I think Germany does have a very deep hang-up about this. It's a moral hang-up and it's a historical hang-up. There is a real fear that actually printing too much money is going to destroy the currency, create rampant inflation. There is also a very deep feeling in Germany that debt, as in the German language, means guilt. That the two words are the same in the German language, Schuld und Schulden, debt and guilt. So it's a moral feeling in Germany that actually people who borrow money are somehow bad. Now, I think that Germany is constantly hesitating too much to saying we have enough money to solve this problem, not to spending the money. The money doesn't need to be spent if the threat of using enough money is there. And I think that's where Germany is constantly hesitating, and therefore the problem gets worse all the time.
Well, Stefano, I want to bring you in on this because you're watching events both in Germany and what's happening in Italy, of course. You have Mario Monti now in charge, considered a technocrat, a very experienced man on the European stage. A lot of confidence in Mario Monti for putting the country back on the right track. He, too, seems to be pressuring Germany to step up to the plate and do more to fix this problem. What does Italy expect Germany to do?
I think that what Italy is looking for is some support to correct the so-called short-sightedness of the market. Because the plans of Mario Monti have been...
Germany is not the market.
Of course.
What does Italy expect from Germany specifically? Because this discussion keeps going back to Germany fix this problem.
Of course. I think that the fear of Mario Monti, as a person with experience in the financial system, is that a credit crunch might actually represent the end of the restructuring hopes for Italy and for Europe above all. I also understand, of course, the point of view of Germany. Inflation fears. Inflation is, of course, a taboo. And on the other hand, they are somehow afraid, Germans are somehow afraid that if some sort of credit crunch hits Germany, they will be lacking enough resources to fix their problem. So they would like to fix their system before fixing other countries' system. Of course, the problems are interrelated.
I think what Angela Merkel said this week in Davos, too, is a very real concern in Germany. If we're the only ones holding the line, if we at the end of the day are going to actually be the guarantors of everybody else's debt, it may be a problem too big for Germany, and then the whole European project, if you like, will be swept away.
There you go. There's this feeling that all cards are being put in on Germany, and Chancellor Merkel referred to this in her speech. She said this: if you depend on Germany too much, you might be opening up a flank that the markets could exploit, and this could create more problems.
True. They can't shoulder, the Germans can't shoulder all the problems, as Quentin has said. I mean, this is not the savior of the world. By God, they're not. But I think she wants a balance. On the one hand, carry on, and Italy does a good job, Ms. Monti, really. And it's the markets who forced Berlusconi out, brought Monti in, brought sanity, if you might say, into the structuring of Italian finance. And if that process goes on, for Italy, it is winning time. For Italy, the spending of the money, if it's not indicating the wrong feelings in the Italian government, saying, oh, well, then we relax if the money is there. If there is a redemption at the end of the road, then we don't. They sort of, on the one hand, keep pressure on the other hand, well, against speculation. That's your argument, the money must be there, but you will never have enough money against speculation. The speculation around the globe can organize not trillions, and no fund in Europe, or forget about Germany, can hold against it. It must be, the process must be, there must be money to, like water, to extinguish the flames.
We're talking about two different ways in which Germany can help. One is, yes, being, if you like, the backstop for saying there is going to be more money in this rescue fund, this European stability mechanism, so that it's big enough to scare the markets off. And maybe nobody could be sure. Yeah. But the other point that Germany can actually do is boost its own economic growth rate at home. Whenever anybody says Germany should reduce its export surplus, there's an immediate reaction in Germany that says, they mean we've got to sell less. No, nobody's saying sell less. What they're saying is spend more in Germany so that you bring more imports in from countries like Italy.
But by the way, the Germans did a good job the last year. I mean, sort of growth between 2 or 3% was enormous for well, and where we don't know what's...
a sluggish old country like Germany,
there are
with
optimistic
China.
notes on the horizon. The business confidence index, the IFO index, is gaining. We're seeing some positive noises, surprising a lot of people.
And America comes back.
We may not see the recession that so many economists have predicted for the coming year. Anyway, Germany does have its own ideas about what should be done and what should not be done. Particularly, German Chancellor Angela Merkel has ideas of what other countries ought to be doing. Now, Germany does have a reputation for fiscal rectitude within the European Union. Some feel that it's being a bit too disciplinary in that sense. But what Chancellor Merkel is going to be pushing upon her European colleagues in Brussels at that summit on Monday is what is being referred to as the fiscal pact. Let's take a look at what that's all about.
The fiscal pact is based partly on the Maastricht criteria, which stipulate that new borrowing be limited to 3% of a country's gross domestic product. Total government debt should not exceed 60% of annual GDP. New measures are intended to reduce excess debt. It's the so-called debt ceiling, which Germany would like to see written into national law in other EU countries. If a state fails to reduce its excess debt voluntarily, the EU would respond with mandatory sanctions. That proposal is facing stiff resistance from countries with large debt burdens.
Well, one of those countries with large debt burdens is Italy. Obviously, Italy and Spain fighting this to some degree. Now, does Mario Monti support these measures, the fiscal pact?
I think he has to. I mean, there is no other option. I think that the priority of Germany is to make sure that the financial system gets its money back in the years to come. I'm a little bit more concerned about what's going to happen in the following years. If I might refer to what you just said, the point is that I believe that stimulating foreign European markets for Germany is equal to stimulating domestic demand. Germany cannot behave as Victorian England did. They cannot just carry on a policy of saying we are an island and we need to save ourselves before the others. It's an interrelated market, accept it or not.
It's interesting. In Davos, where the World Economic Forum has been meeting, Chancellor Merkel delivered the speech, and in the speech she talked about that to some degree. She talked about the need for integration, for European integration. She said in her speech that without European integration, Europe will remain an interesting holiday destination, she said, for a long time, but we won't be able to produce prosperity. So I guess the Chancellor has one very specific idea of what integration is supposed to be, and that is that other European countries should share Germany's sense of fiscal discipline. Why is that so hard for other European countries?
Well, they're different countries. The more you come to the northern part of Europe, there's more Germany organized. If you more come to the southern part, it is different. You could see it in countries where Austria, with a sort of civil service strict regime, has in parts of Poland, which were Austrian governed, there's another feeling there, as different to other parts of Poland, where this Austrian civil service mentality has not been in place for many years. So the answer to is German example, well, it doesn't even sound nice for the others to follow German examples. But
this is a prosperous economy. I mean, other countries would like to be in Germany's position.
True.
Fiscally.
But the prosperity has some preconditions. One of these preconditions is social reform. That's what Monti starts in Italy. What Germany, under a social democratic chancellor, and even the government in place, is repeating itself, praising Chancellor Schröder for what he did in his 6 years or 5 last years, whatever. This sort of social reforms, restructuring, cutting extra expenditure, and then create more jobs. The unemployment is on almost the lowest rate for 20 years. If the other countries in Europe would find this way, whatever their national way to it is, then the fiscal problems would solve by itself. It's the bottom which is not solid.
But there is a conflict, I think, here between Germany's preaching fiscal discipline, but actually using the language which Frau Merkel has used, fiscal union. Now, we're actually talking two very different things. Fiscal discipline is a very narrowly focused solution to this problem, and it's not enough. We need growth as well as discipline.
True.
But fiscal union would be this integrated European Union, but that would require a much bigger central budget, and it would become something that Germany seems to be terrified of, a transfer union, where the rich actually do transfer money to the poor.
It would also involve a strengthening of European institutions and perhaps a transfer of sovereignty to
Not
Brussels.
Not perhaps.
Well,
You need a central government. If you will make Dutch or German or Austrian or other citizens spending money for citizens in Greece or wherever, Portugal or Italy, then you do need a central government, fiscal in one hand, and that means a major step forward in political union as we have of today.
So we've got basically two things happening here. We've got the specific instruments that are being debated in Brussels among the European leaders and within the Council. How is Europe going to handle this specific problem using the instruments that it has? And then there's the European integration issue. How do you bring Europe closer together so that it can function as a healthy organism in the future, create those institutions? These things are separate but linked. One of the key instruments, I want to talk about the instruments for a moment, is this European stability mechanism. How much money should be in it? How should that money be handed out and dealt with? Right now, there's talk of having 500 billion in it. Some feel there should be 1 trillion. Germany is resisting this. Why should Germany resist what seems to be, according to the consensus with the United States, the International Monetary Fund, why should Germany resist having 1 trillion euros in the ESM?
I think it's because Germany is terrified that if the money is put in too soon, the discipline won't happen. No. They won't get the fiscal pact.
Yes.
Germany doesn't actually trust the other leaders of Europe. The arrival of Mario Monti in Italy is hugely important because he's much more trustworthy than Silvio Berlusconi was before him. The funny thing is, I don't believe that Madame Merkel trusts Mr. Sarkozy in France. There is a doubt that the French would actually be as disciplined as they ought to be.
And there's something else. Germany have, as you called it, a taboo of inflation. If the money is there and is used, then it's in the market. How will you ever get this enormous seas, oceans of liquidity out of the system and sort of reduce a possible danger of inflation? The Americans had an enormous amount of, at the end of the Second World War, I think it was 115% of their GDP, but they got it out. They got it out by a special policy selling the national bonds below what inflation was.
Well, it's not as bad as Greece at the moment in terms of the GDP ratio, but I want to talk about one more thing before we do move on to Greece. We will end on Greece, but the relationship between this demand for fiscal discipline and the quest for unity in Europe. This interests me very much, and I'm wondering if Chancellor Merkel is not her own worst enemy in her pursuit of integration when she is refusing to allow a top-up of the ESM.
I think that Angela Merkel is actually right, because I do not believe I do not fully believe in the system. Saying the endowment is going to be 1 trillion, whatever, the market is going to learn of it, is going to react to it, it's going to swallow it.
Okay.
Yeah. And overall, 1 trillion is around 60% of the Italian national debt. So, how much is it? And then what will we have in the end? Inflation.
Yeah.
That's it.
We've got to be absolutely clear. The European stability mechanism is not enough for Italy. Italy has to solve its own problems.
True.
That's why Mario Monti matters.
True.
Okay.
True, very much.
That's
so.
why the Italians matter. Because the fiscal burden in 2013 is going to be around 53% in Italy. So you have a population which said we are ready to pay this awful lot of money to keep our continent together.
Confidence in Italy has grown since Mario Monti took over. Ireland and Portugal, nobody's talking about those countries anymore. They seem to be somehow sorting out with what they've got. Spain, a lot of concern still there, but then we keep coming back to Greece. Greece just won't go away, and there's a lot of confidence slipping there still. It is a marvelous country, Greece, but the cradle of civilization, of Western civilization, seems to be on the brink of financial ruin. In fact, some think it's already beyond the brink.
Greece's finance minister, Evangelos Venizelos, is feeling increasingly uncomfortable in Brussels, and he has good reason. It's becoming more and more apparent that Greece will not be able to deliver on its promises of more budget cuts and reforms. Jean-Claude Juncker, the head of the Eurogroup, says it's obvious that the Greek programme is off track. There seems to be a lot of activity, but few real reforms. The latest example is the naming of those who owe the Greek government the most in back taxes. Nobody really believes that those billions will ever be collected.
Friedrich, is Greece a lost cause?
Almost. It's different from all the other countries. You were mentioning Ireland. Ireland came out of the trap. They're out. The Irish really did the thing. It was enormous political cost, but they got out of it, and bravo to the Irish. But in Greece, the situation is totally different. There is no infrastructure. There is no civil service. There have been, till 1923, when the last Turks went out of the country, under Turkish occupation for 450 years. That nothing real Greek grew up, and they had this sort of funny crisis already in the 19th century. This is not the first time Greece makes a lot of cutting gold coins and funny things, and all the nations in that game were very flabbergasted at the end. I think almost a lost cause, as if we put more money in, if we help them, then we give them the feeling, or even other nations in Europe, how at the end of the day there is the lender of last resort, Angela Merkel or the Prime Minister of the Netherlands or Austria. This is the danger, but Greece is very, very difficult to cure.
It is. I totally agree, and I think perhaps this crisis would have been more swiftly resolved if Greece had actually defaulted right at the start and we'd taken the risk.
But what do we do now? This is a question. It's still there. You have the Troika. We're going through the motions of the European Commission, the European Central Bank, the International Monetary Fund, walking around Greece, checking things, telling, okay, are you doing what you're supposed to do? Isn't Greece really already beyond help?
It is. I mean, they're just negotiating the default, and that's it. It's pretty much done.
So the question is, where do we go next? How do we stop a Greek default, pulling the whole thing down, causing the contagion of knock-on, which we're seeing already? And that is the huge challenge.
Well, it's also how, for the Greeks, it's an existential question. What do we do next? Can they continue to save? Interesting statement coming from former investor and philanthropist George Soros in Davos. He said that, and I quote, the austerity Germany wants will push Europe into a deflationary death spiral, is what he said. He said that the economy will contract, tax revenues will fall, the debt burden will rise, requiring further budget cuts and setting in motion a vicious cycle. Is this a plausible scenario? Is this what we could see, particularly with Greece?
No.
Great social unrest?
No.
I think social unrest in Greece itself.
In Greece itself.
But the question is, and this is where Italy is
question.
so important to the equation, if Mario Monti can not only get the immediate austerity through, but get the structural reforms through to get the Italian economy growing, and the Italian economy has been totally stagnating for a decade, the lowest growth in the world except for Zimbabwe and Haiti, I think. And this is desperate. So get growth back into Italy and the whole Eurozone would actually start to stabilise.
It's a very important topic, the one you just mentioned. Also because if you take a look at the last 20 years, pensioners saw an increase in their money, which was fourfolds the increase in salaries. And beneath the lack of growth, there's also
unsustainable. Isn't it?
It's also a huge problem of polarization. So domestic demand in Italy is stagnating.
Yes, but there's one different problem, an actual problem for additional for the German government, especially regarding Greece. If the government, the people here see how money is transported out of Greece, and those taxes people don't pay, then they say, oh my God, and that is for the political class, for the election. In this country, how can you burden new billions on German taxpayers being put into a country where the governing financial elite is exporting all the money you bring in here? This is being a lot of concern to leaders here, Social Democrats as well as Christian Democrats and liberals.
I'm curious about one point, and this is what's being debated a lot, and that is the European stability mechanism, whether this big bailout fund, the permanent rescue fund that they hope will be in place by the middle of this year, will Germany need to cave in and agree to topping it up to $1 trillion, and is that going to fix the problem? Stefano.
I am strongly afraid about a very long and deep causation mechanism. We started with a housing bubble. We switched to a financial bubble, then to a public debt bubble. Now I'm afraid of a rescue of public debt bubble. And so what's going to come next?
Bubbles on bubbles, yes.
Yes.
So what do you think? Quentin, is Germany going to cave in?
Well, I think Germany is going to concede a bit. I mean, Frau Merkel is sort of saying not $1 trillion. The trouble is then that won't impress people. What we've got in this European stability mechanism is actually what Wolfgang Schäuble, the German finance minister, put on the table last year. This is a European monetary fund. In the long term, we need this. We need a stash of cash to stop this sort of thing ever happening again. Now, Frau Merkel doesn't want to do it till she's got the rules in place. So the whole thing hangs on that.
Rules.
Can she get her rules before she gives her money?
Right, we're going to have to leave it there. Quentin Peel, Friedrich Thelen, and Stefano Casartano, thank you very much for being with us here on Quadriga. Do check us out on the internet at dwworld.de.